primitive mycology here. And for this video, we're going to be sending agar to grain. We're going to inoculate some grain spawn here. I've got all my workspace prepped. Don't mind the stains on there. That's just where agar's dripped through the grate that I normally use onto there. It's not any kind of contaminant or anything. It's just a stain from agar that I've poured. Anyways, to create grain spawn, one of the most important tools that I have found is the impulse sealer. You absolutely do not have to have this. For quite some time, I would fold over the top of a bag and staple it. Grain spawn bags, I would fold over the top and staple it. That does work if you put about 4 staples across there. It does create another possible vector of contamination. At times I've lost bags, but you can never be sure that it wasn't some mistake you made that you didn't notice, or that maybe your grain wasn't properly sterile. I've also used binder clips, and I've also used packing tape. All those methods work just fine. You can also use pint, quart, and half-gallon jars. Later in the video, I'll be inoculating a half-gallon jar. But for now, we're going to be doing this 3-pound bag of grain here. Really, this is quite simple. First things first, we're gonna mist it down with alcohol. And just let her sit here in front of the flow a second while I get a rag. Sanitize my hand. Get a 70% isopropyl rag. You can absolutely use paper towel instead if that's what you prefer. I just find that these do not disintegrate like a paper towel does. But in the meantime, go ahead and give the bag really good wipe down, making sure that I'm not saturating the filter patch. If you get a little bit of moisture on the filter patch, it won't be the end of the world, that's for sure. It's definitely going to dry in front of the hood, and the alcohol will evaporate off of it very quickly. But you absolutely do not want to soak it. For this, got some golden oyster that I've taken a subculture from a couple of different times for long-term storage, so I can keep this culture. This was germinated from spore. The first transfer was 5/5, so this was probably actually done mid-April is when I did the grab and drag with a spore swab. Also later, when we do the half-gallon jar, we'll be inoculating that with my Ataki. Anyways, these little cups are great for spawn because you're just going to throw it away. Any kind of longer term storage or to keep a culture going to then make spawn with, you want to use 90mm or 60mm plates. But anyways, let's get to it here. Go ahead and give our scissors a spritz here. Wipe them down. Just let them sit right here in our clean space. And in the meantime, meantime, go ahead and switch sides with this so it can be seen easier. Go ahead and get them out of the way. We'll go ahead and wipe down our spawn cup here. Get it sanitized. That way we limit any chance of introducing a contaminant to it. In the meantime, go ahead and sterilize our scalpel. I try to, before I ever cut the bag open, I like to get my scalpel good and sterile. To get that good and sterile, and let it sit. Let that sit in front of the flow there. Cool a second. I'll get my cup opened up, and I'm going to go ahead first. Make sure your scalpel's cool. I'm going to cut this agar cup up just into, you know, I usually go 5 cuts across both ways. Go ahead and drop that back in there, and I just kind of set the lid back on top. It doesn't have to be sealed at this point. It's getting ready to go in this bag. So now that that's been seen there, go ahead and get this prepped here. Make sure it's good and clean. Okay, and I'm gonna let that sit just like that so it doesn't touch anything. I don't really want the top of this bag to be able to lean down or lean over and touch anything. That's just a vector contamination. I'm sure that it's probably a small chance, being as everything's in front of the flow here, but anything I can do to mitigate problems later is definitely worth it, because I don't want to spend all this time doing this and then it failed. So let's try to avoid that. So now we'll go ahead and re-sterilize our scalpel. And if you notice here, I always use this little jar with isopropyl in it to store my tools in between uses. That way I'm kind of sanitizing and cutting through anything that might be stuck on there in between. Rather than leaving it exposed. And again, I'll set this over here where it's in front of the flow. Go back just a second. And I always do kind of like a test with the impulse sealer. I always run it down one cycle to heat that contact up. That way, when I go to make my seal, I don't have any trouble. Okay, so now that we got that, go ahead with our clean some scissors here. We're going to cut the top of her bag off. Done with those for right now. And kind of what I like to do is I just kind of pull the bag back. I want it laying down at the level of the impulse sealer because I don't want to be having to pull and put tension on this while I'm trying to seal it. So I just do something kind of like this. I'm going to let it sit right there like that for a second. And then very simply, open it up here. I'm going to kind of rake all this agar loose. In the bag we go. If you'll notice, I did touch just that top edge, but that's not something that I'm going to be concerned with because I'm using this impulse sealer. If I was not, then I would never touch that top, but that's one of the beauties of the impulse sealer. Once I seal this bag, there's going to be nothing that can get past that point of the seal. So if I touch that very, very, very top edge, it's not going to be the end of the world. And very simply, press down and hold. After the impulse sealer stops its cycle, you're going to want to hold this. Don't release it for at least 30 seconds. That plastic's just been pretty much molten hot, and if you release it before it cools under there, it's going to tear your seal apart, or it will not seal completely. And although my FFU is tall enough that I can stand these bags up, I found that it makes it so much easier. I don't have to really hold anything when I do it like this. Also, because of the angle of the camera, it makes it easy doing it like this too. And as you can see, there's a nice seal all the way across the top of that. And I always seal twice. And if I have any inclination that it might have not sealed properly, well then I'll seal a third time. There's absolutely nothing wrong with any amount of extra seals. At a certain point, you're just wasting time. But to seal twice is, I think, intelligent. 3 times if you have any doubts. Yeah, that's it. That simple. And now that this is sealed, all that agar that's in the top there, I'm going to kind of shake this bag up. Get that agar mixed down in there. it. I'm gonna label this. I used to use a piece of masking tape or duct tape. At a certain point I was buying labels, and then I seen on another video, and this has been a few years ago, it hit me, the filter patch is perfect for writing on, and it requires absolutely nothing extra. So we'll get this labeled Golden Oyster. Number 4, which means that this is the 4th phenotype that I picked from the germination plate. And if I like this, when it grows out, when I see a fruit, then I will take this fruiting culture, dikaryon, and I've got 2 golden oyster monokaryons that I've confirmed under the microscope that I might try to cross into it, see what it does. I've also got some plans here to see if it's possible to cross the pink oyster with a gold. I recently picked 4 or 5 monokaryons from the pink oyster, Pleurotus jamor. Putative monokaryons for the pink. They haven't yet been confirmed, but here soon I will, and I'm sure at least 2 of them will be monos. This is where mycology gets exciting, is when you start crossing things. I've been able to successfully cross the pulmonarius and the columbinus oyster, but I've never tried the Citrinopiliatus, the gold, and the Dijamor. So this will be an exciting venture. Today is 7/3/24, and that's it. Just as simply, in about 2 or 3 weeks, or sorry, about 2 weeks, this will be going to substrate, and I will make a video of that too when I spawn this to bulk. And this 3-pound bag here will make no less than 3-pound bag. It should make 6 half-pound bag, or 6 6-pound bags, half a pound per bag, and that's spawning heavy. So 6 6-pound fruiting blocks will produce a substantial amount of mushrooms, or be enough to make a 15 by 15 bed outside. Yeah, this is mycology. This is the stuff that makes it happen. My favorite part. Anyways, I'm gonna pause this video for a minute while I get the half-gallon jar ready, and I'll show you the process of that with the maitake. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Okay, now we're back. And as I said earlier in the video, this is a little bit different when you're working with a half-a-gallon jar as opposed to a bag. I've used pint jars, quart jars, and now I've kind of moved to half-gallon jars, just because it's one vessel, and it's, I think, about 2 pounds. Whenever you make your spawn jars, you always want to leave an air space in the top. And I find when I do that with a quart, I just don't feel like there's that much left. You know, growing gourmets, especially summertime when you're, you know, wanting to grow outside more than inside, you know, a mushroom bed is pretty large, and I prefer to have several in several blocks at the end, because again, just like with anything else, after this grain spawn colonizes, this will get spawned into bulk, and this half-gallon jar here this should make 4 6-pound bags. You could stretch it much further if you wanted to, but when you're making your own spawn and it's not really a cost thing, I prefer to spawn heavy with grain into the bulk substrate. It gives it a lot more nutrition, a lot more energy. Anyways, this is very similar to the process with the bag, except for my jars, I always wrap in grafting tape before they go into the pressure cooker, because of the plastic lids. And the pressure cooker, it's going to shrink a lot, that wrap, and that's, you know, kind of my intention, because when I prepare grain spawn, I would prefer to make enough for 3, 4, 5, 6 months at a time, rather than little batches that are frequent. You know, I have a full-time job. Would love to do this full-time, but that's just not the case. So until then, I prefer to make grain once every 3 or 4 months. So when I do, I'm making 20, 30, 40 3-pound bags, several jars. This Griffith frondosa, the Maitake, I'm going to make some fruiting blocks in the future, as well as expand this spawn into more. Anytime you make a master jar like this, which is what it is when you're inoculating with agar, you can expand this into, I usually will take 3 teaspoons out of it, and each one of those teaspoons will go into another half-gallon jar or a 3-pound bag, kind of whatever I got on hand, and I will expand the spawn where I could make, you know, much more. But I think also I will make a video on making plug spawn as well, for doing log cultivation outdoors. Logs take a little bit of labor and work. Some of it's kind of hard work, but you only have to do it once, and the logs will fruit for somewhere around 5 years. They're going to just continue to give you mushrooms each year. And Maitake, some people call it sheep's head, is delectable. I mean, it's way high up on the list of some of the tastiest gourmets there is. Anyways, let's get to it here. Since I have used this scalpel previously here on other bags of spawn, I'm going to sterilize it very heavily with this larger torch. And I go a little ways up the handle as well. I don't get the handle red hot at this point, but I always go up the handle a little bit to kind of burn off anything on the surface. And then when I change species from the oysters, or I also did some portobello today, that'll go out in between my garden rows, I want to get this just absolutely cherry red for a few seconds, or or several seconds rather than just a few seconds like I normally would, just because I don't want any kind of remnant of the other mycelium possibly hanging on. I don't believe it could, but it's just one of those things. When I change species, I do a really heavy sterilization of the blade. Although these blades are cheap, they do cost something. So while that handle and that cools off, because it does heat up just a little bit, just leave this sit in front of the flow as this cools, and I'm going to pause the video for just a minute as it cools. Okay, we're back. Sanitize your hands. You absolutely can't sanitize your hands too much. You want to try not to be touching anything that the mycelium is going to touch. You know, anything the mycelium will come in contact with. You don't want to be getting isopropyl alcohol directly on, meaning the media itself. But just like before, go ahead and cut this up. Do 4 or 5 cuts across. And this isn't the prettiest mycelium because it came out of a liquid culture syringe that I got from Oregon Gourmet Mushrooms. I've got several good cultures from them. They also make spore swabs for gourmets. Used to be the, you know, spore swabs were a negative something. Now they're being made for gourmets as well. So we got our lid broke loose. I'm just going to sit that up there. I dip my scalpel in there for a second. So we'll go ahead and re-sterilize. Maybe. Okay, I guess we'll go with the big torch. Set this across the top of our jar here. Since I touched that other torch that isn't in front of the flow, I'm going to re-sanitize my hands. Try just a second here. And when you make a mistake like that, that means you get to start back over. I guess I could edit that out, but this is a good point here. Things happen. When something like that happens, it's not the end of the world. You just pick your scalpel up, you're going to wipe it back off with your isopropyl rag, and then very simply just re-sterilize. We all make mistakes. I see a lot of videos get put out there with kind of the intent of the person making it is perfect, and no offense to anyone, but absolutely nobody's perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. So why hide it? Why would I want to make some newcomer, someone that's never done this before, that might be thinking about going from buying mushroom block kits to maybe making their own, or starting to learn the process as they kind of work backwards. That's how I started. Was I bought a grow kit off of Amazon, grew it out in the simplest, most basic monotub, and I will make a future video on building monotubs. Also how to automate them so they're hands-free. Once you take your fruiting block, cut it open, put it inside, you program one timer for the fan, and you can get a, oh, I can't think of the name of it. It regulates your relative humidity. Inkbird is a common one, but you just set the low point of the humidity, the high point of the humidity, and it will do it all for you with a homemade humidifier that you can build very, very cheaply. And I'd be happy to make a video for that too. But starting out, very simply, you can make a very simple monotub with a 64 quart tub or 66, just depends on what brand. Very simple. You don't need hardly any tools. A hole saw, or you can use a soldering iron. Will cut holes through plastic. Either way, doesn't matter. But the placement of your holes does matter for air exchange. And then just as simply as misting it with distilled water daily. Not misting the mushrooms directly, but inside the tub will keep the humidity up enough that they will definitely grow in your living room, your bedroom, your kitchen. You can put them in a closet, anywhere. Very simply, you grow oyster mushrooms or shiitake, anything like that, inside or outside. But I don't want to give the impression to anyone, especially someone that doesn't know anything about this, and is most definitely probably nervous about learning how to do this so they can grow their own food, healthy food. You know, especially at a time that our economy is not the greatest. Money's tight. You know, why not learn how to grow something for yourself? This is cooled off now. So we're going to go ahead and take this, and we'll pull our lid off here. And just the same as we did with the bags, we're just going to pop our agar wedges into the jar. And because there's no seal, you know, no bag seal, I want to make sure that I absolutely do not touch the rim of that jar. Now there is a seal up inside of this polypropylene lid. I buy the seal separate. They make all the difference in the world. You definitely want to go with a seal, or you can do what I did with the parafilm going around it. That works just as well. But anyways, this is how really very simple this is. You can also use liquid culture syringes, hence the injection port. And very simply, with a liquid culture syringe, you would just clean off the injection port, flame sterilize your needle, stick it in, inject 2 to 3 cc's. In something this size, you could probably go 4 or 5, and just wait. That simple. This is going to be lots and lots of maitake mushrooms a few months from now. And think about what maitake costs at the store. There's good reason to learn to grow these. Anyways, have a good day, everybody. Primitive mycology.